The average technician uses 9 apps. We did a study with one of our large customers, 9 apps on a job site. The reality is it's way too many, and they're still calling when they have a problem, an average of 4 or 5 other techs. And so when
Wow.
they have an issue, they're making all those phone calls, which is pulling another tech off a job. And then, then we talk about the game for 10 minutes. You know how those things go.
Yeah.
So how do we give them the tools where that information is there? It's accessible. And then where we train them is more on the nuanced pieces that keep them from waiting on technical support for too long, making those 4 or 5 calls, engaging 9 different applications to figure out the solution to a problem. It allows us to take the education up a notch. And we're seeing that throughout the industry. And I think the companies are doing it well, are looking at their training differently as a result.
Today's guest is going to be no stranger to anybody that's been listening to our show for a while. I had him on a couple of years ago, and so much has changed in the world of technology and how we support our field technicians. There's so much opportunity to allow them to really show up in their brilliance by giving them the information that they need right at their fingertips. We live in this always connected, always on world where we want information right away. And today, and the CEO of XOi Technologies, we sit down and we talk about the impact this is having on your people and their performance. Welcome to today's show, Aaron Salow with XOi Technologies. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Brian, thanks for having me.
You know, this is not the first time we've recorded a show together, so I'm really excited to have you back. Really enjoyed the last time that we talked, and you're doing some amazing things over there at XOi to support field services industry, which is amazing. But what I'd love to do today as we get started on this is I like to change the way people think about things. We all have self-limiting beliefs, especially in business, things that we believe are true, but are not true. What's one of those big myths that you want to shatter for people right now?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is the commentary around this next generation. I always
Mm.
find it interesting about this new generation's worthless. They don't know how to work. They're lazy. Every generation has said that about
Yes,
the next generation.
they have.
And I think it's a myth. The reality is there are people that have good discipline and good character and work really hard in every generation. And there are lazy people that don't want to work very hard in every generation as well. I think the
It's true.
difference is potentially is that the opportunity for employer to engage a generation that has grown up with technology and has
Mm.
expectations out of how they run their world with technology. I was just reminded we use Alexa more than we ever have in our lives at home because I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, and a 5 and 2-year-old ask questions about things all day long.
Yeah.
We were at the Nashville Zoo this weekend looking at Komodo dragons. I don't know if you got a chance to get out there yet. Pretty cool. And it's like, Dad, how long does a Komodo dragon get? It's like that information they're used to right away.
Hmm.
I can say it out loud and it comes back to me, and I know that Komodo dragons can be 10 feet long. Well, I think in the employment world, it's a similar type of thing where this generation's expectations around technology are a meaningful factor for how they get information, how they learn. And so you have to be intentional. But I think the myth of, they're all worthless. It's a silly thing that I hear often.
I've studied a lot of that because it's not true. Yes, there are lazy people that are entitled in every generation. I
Of
know
course.
boomers that are lazy and entitled. And the thing is like, well, they don't keep jobs for very long. You know what? When you boomers were in your teens and early 20s, guess what? You were switching jobs like crazy too. It wasn't
Yeah,
until you had a family, you got to your mid 30s and you're like, hey, maybe I should make a career out of this, which is now where the millennials are. Gen Z is just coming into that. So you have to not look at just that little window that supports the stat that you want, which is what so
that's
many
right.
people do. But I love what you said about growing up on technology. I was just talking about this with my mom. So I just moved my family across country, and so grandparents are still back in Arizona, and we're
Hmm.
out here in the Mideast now. And my kids have so much the ability to connect with grandma and grandpa, whether it's online or through FaceTime or whatever. They're growing up with this technology.
Hmm.
I remember when I was a kid and I had a medical event and my mom was home by herself with me. My dad didn't find out until he got home and she was at the hospital and left him a note on the kitchen counter. Like that was just the world they lived in. But now, when my wife and I moved across country, we said, hey, we had the conversation, where can we get same day prime delivery? Like we were so used to this always connected, instant gratification. And seriously, if we move too far out in the country and it didn't have even same day Prime delivery, it's like, well, maybe that's not the neighborhood for us. So like that was a
Isn't that
conversation
wild?
we had. Isn't crazy?
Yep. Yep.
And my kids do the same thing. They'll just be like, Alexa, how long is this? What's this? And I'm just like, I didn't have that when I was a kid. And so I get that. Like, that's their personal world. Well, that's causing us to have to shift as employers.
That's right.
So, what are you seeing employers doing that is both working and not working? Like, what are some of the things they need to keep doing, but also
Hmm.
some of the things they need to stop doing because it's not helping them?
Yeah, I think it changes the nature of education writ large. I mean, you have educational systems of sitting and taking standardized tests and being able to understand certain things that you have just access to all the time. It is changing that. But when I think about field service, specifically the contractors that we're fortunate enough to work with, I think this concept of, I didn't learn it that way. I had to shadow somebody for 5 years. I had all this information. The reality is, instead of kind of harboring on the old ways of doing things, how about we think about different ways that education needs to happen? I don't have to go, did I pack that 57-page manual in my van? Because that information should be readily available to that technician when they have a problem on site. Potentially, I'm focusing more on nuance. I'm focusing more on, well, there's a certain way that this system was installed initially that's going to change how it performs. And so let's focus on nuance training and things that they're going to see that are unique versus, well, in the old days, we did it like this and we did it like this and we did it like this. For example, I see companies that are engaging with technologies like ours and others that are saying, hey, we want to make the easy information easy to find. The
Mm,
average technician uses 9 apps. We did a study with one of our large customers, 9 apps on a job site. The reality is it's way too many. And they're still calling when they have a problem, an average of 4 or 5 other techs. And so when
wow.
they have an issue, they're making all those phone calls, which is pulling another tech off a job. And then, and we talk about the game for 10 minutes. You know how those things go.
Yeah.
So how do we give them the tools where that information is there? It's accessible. And then where we train them is more on the nuance pieces that keep them from waiting on technical support for too long, making those 4 or 5 calls, engaging 9 different applications to figure out the solution to a problem. It allows us to take the education up a notch. And we're seeing that throughout the industry. And I think the companies that are doing it well are looking at their training differently as a result.
It gets me thinking back to a conversation I had a couple weeks ago where they were talking about when you're training someone, train them for what they need to learn, not for what you've standardized across everything, right? So
That's right.
sometimes we'll have a technician come in and we'll have to teach them some technical skills, but their sales skills, their people skills are off the charts. But we have this belief, well, they have to go through the same people skills training. And it's the same thing here is we've got all this information, this technical information, a 57-page tech manual. It's digitized. We can just do a quick search and find the information. We need to teach them more of that critical thinking stuff and how do they
Soft
troubleshoot
skills
and
too.
those kinds of
Yep.
things. And realizing that this technology is available and they expect it.
That's right.
They expect it on the job. And if you're still living in the days where they've got to fax in information, ran into a company that you had to fax in your job application. I'm like, who even
Uh,
knows what a fax machine is anymore?
yep.
It's crazy.
I understand. I had a company ask me recently to fax them some other information, and I was like, did I just step into a time machine? Do you want
Yeah.
me to? I don't even know how to do that. They're like,
Yeah.
well, you do it through like an email server that then faxes. I'm like, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What are we
Yeah.
doing?
So I can see they have that expectation. My personal life, this information's always readily available. So why can it not be readily available here?
That's right.
So what are some things that you see that people are doing to really support this and embrace this change?
Yeah. I think it's got to be more than just, sending someone to Google. It's got to be more than, well, we've got distributors for that. Distributors are supposed to train you or whatever the case may be. If you think about our industry in field service, it's largely a long tail industry. There's a lot of small companies. It's kind of 75% is 5 technicians or less.
Mm,
And so they don't have the resources to have a director of training or something. They're depending on other people. And so I think the companies we see being most successful, no matter what size they are, they're able to own tribal knowledge within their business. So we talk about this quite a bit that the reason we have a skilled trades gap, it's something we all know really well in this industry, is that we have men and women that acquire decades of talent and then they retire. And the reality is there's no way to democratize that knowledge in a meaningful way. It just happens to assimilate whatever you talk to around the hardware shop, or if you happen to work with somebody, your own experiences. And so the companies we see really taking this head on go, every job site experience, whether it be the person skills, what the asset is doing, how it's performing or not performing, we're going to learn from that. We're going to pull data from that. And I'll give you one example. We're working with an organization right now that is well known for their certification process, and we're analyzing the effectiveness of that certification on site. If you think of a lot of education that's happening, whether it's virtual, whether it's a certification process, we don't actually know how effective that is. It's like, oh, I'm blank certified. Okay, that's good. Training's good. What does that mean in terms of your skill sets on site? That you fix things faster, you assess them faster? Are you more effective? You mentioned soft skills, same thing. And so when you start to really put something in place that allows you to understand what's actually happening on a job site, how that unit performs, how the technician performs, you build this thing of understanding their proficiency. And it's more effective than just checking the box of a certification or having a general gut sense. And so long-winded answer to your question is data. How are we assessing data in a way that allows us to get better in every interaction? Meaning I know how long it takes to do this. I know how that asset performs. I know this person's efficacy against that kind of asset. And that's kind of the last frontier in field service, is this black box that is the job site, where we send smart men and women on site and we go, yeah, fix the thing. And it's just this kind of like, what really happened?
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
the problems that's happening? So that's step one. And that will allow companies to take advantage of the AI revolution that no question is upon us in a way that's meaningful. I think there's a lot of people marketing a lot of things right now that are not going to be meaningful for field service. And this is a way to do it.
We share a couple clients that use XOi. And I think that what I've seen is there's two parts to this. One is being able to collect the meaningful data. And that's where a platform like your system comes into play, is that you help collect the data, because it's really easy to go collect the easy data, the vanity metrics, the how many Facebook likes did we get, those kinds of things that are meaningless in our business. It's a little more challenging sometimes to collect the meaningful data. And I know that XOi does that. But then what I see, and I've seen this with some of the clients that we share, is they have all the data, but they do nothing with it. And so it's really two pieces. One, you've got to collect the right data accurately. And then the other one is you've got to do something with it. So can you address both of those challenges? Because I know there are people listening that they have one or both of those challenges.
When we think about the job site and that being kind of the next front.
Stop turning away work, burning out your team, and working so hard. Learn about the proven process that businesses everywhere are using to save time, save money, and hire all the people they need. We'll train your team to implement and run this process in-house so you can grow as fast as you want. Book a call with our team at corematters.com.
Here for any business that wants to grow. And that's the entire supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of 4 steps that we think about at XOi. You think about the engagement. So that's what you're talking about. How do we gather meaningful data that solves problems right now? Because we're not going to just tell a bunch of technicians like, hey, just start capturing a bunch of data.
Mm-hmm.
For what? Oh, we're going to build something in the future. We're like, I'm busy.
Yeah.
Like I don't have time for this. No, we're capturing the data now because we want to understand our asset universe. We want to give the customer a great experience. We want to cover our butts in the field. We want to have great sales, consistent sales, requisitions, those types of things. What that gives you is data, which is step 2. Step 3 is insights. So you have to cull insights from that data. They're not going to just fall in your lap. And then step 4, to your point, is the 2 ends of the sandwich are the hardest parts.
Mm-hmm.
Step 4 is re-engagement. How do I take those insights and give them back to people that are using this in the field in a meaningful way that changes how well they're able to support our customers? And so what we've seen is that we see people using insights today in the office. We see them using it for sales. We see them using it for customer reviews, that type of thing. We have commercial and residential customers. And so obviously those are different touch points depending on those. The re-engagement piece, I think, has been accelerated massively by AI. Although I think that it is different than a lot of people are saying. So people are releasing AI agents left and right. It's there's some sort of special data set that's pumped through ChatGPT or Bard, one of these big guys, and saying, hey, look, the reality is if you look at all these platforms, I'm asking it a question and it's giving me 10 paragraphs. And if you ever talk to a technician or dealt with techs any time in your life, you go, really? They're not going to sit on site and read this. Like,
yeah.
we have to get this thing very prescriptive. And the first time it hallucinates, a tech is like, I'm never using it again. And it's just the nature of their job.
Yep.
And so where I see AI really informing this engagement and where we're headed as a company is it should be a customized experience for every technician on the site for the boring stuff too. Meaning, I know this tech's effectiveness. I know what they worked on. I know the kind of challenges that they tend to have based on time on site and things like that. I'm going to organize a process that is custom to that tech and the asset they're in front of. And when I say the boring stuff, whether it's, hey, they're doing an install, they've had challenges in the install before. For guys that are really good at this, it's 5 steps. For this person, we're going to add 2 more steps because they've got caught at this place before. And again, it's blocking and tackling. It may not make a fantastic marketing video because you have these videos where like, look, I just talked to a AI agent. It just gives me all the answers. That's not reality if you're focusing on the men and women that do these jobs every day. They are hot, sweaty, getting rained on like today in Nashville, and they don't have time to be reading through this stuff. You have to give them steps to that re-engagement. And so we think that's intentional process from front to back with those 4 steps.
Yeah, that got my brain spinning here thinking about some of this stuff. One of the things that popped into my head when you said that is too, I think, and you said this, these are experts in the field. Like these are people that know what they're doing. They know how to troubleshoot. You can't give them something that comes across as condescending. And that's what 10 paragraphs is. It's like, oh, you don't know all this, so we're going to give you the step by step. It's like, no, you need to give them the stuff that they need that either they don't know or they just need a better way to articulate. And
give me that spot in the manual.
Yeah.
And then show me how to order this part like that.
Done.
That's what I need.
Yeah.
I don't need this big long thing.
And I do think that it's going to take a while before I see all the buzz around AI. We're talking about AI here and how it relates to recruiting and onboarding and everything else. And so it's impacting every area of the business. Mm-hmm. But I do think that it's still in its very immature stage and we're figuring it all out. And the hallucination, that happens probably more than anybody would like to admit, the hallucination, which is why it's really hard to trust this stuff. But yeah, I think that re-engagement with the data is so critical. We had one client and they're like, yeah, we have over 12,000 videos that are in XOi's platform. I'm like, great, what do you do with them? We tell people we have 12. This was almost their response. We tell people we have 12,000 videos and it's a great platform. We're like, but you don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up that this does show up in other areas of the business. It's not just in the field. It's not just operations. We do this in sales. We do this in customer service. We do this in accounting. We do this everywhere in our business where we collect data and then we do something with that data and then we engage back with our people on that data. And I know I oversimplified your 4 steps, but we do this in other areas of our business. So what's really happening in the field now? You've talked about AI, you've talked about some of this stuff. Tell me about what do you see happening in the field that is helping people not only attract better talent, but also retain their talent? Because I think that what you're talking about has a ton to do with being able to attract great people and retain them. Because if you don't do these things that they expect, because this is what they get in their personal life, they're going to go find someone that does.
That's right.
So talk to me about that for a minute.
It's interesting if you really think about what stakeholders care about the job site. It is the technician themselves, the end customer, the service manager back at the office. The OEM cares about it, and they're getting involved in the game as well because they realize that earning technician trust is going to earn them market share. That's an important thing that's happening right now for any OEM that is paying attention. And so when you think about the attract and retain from a technician's perspective, they have a lot of jobs and a lot of interaction points they have to have on a job site. And so our ability to streamline that for them, make that clean and easy. I mentioned the 9 apps on a job site. One of our big pushes this year is to make our system kind of the foundation for the job site and not pretend, and we never have, but we're saying it more openly now, that we're going to build all the things. So we've created integration points with other great platforms. We've announced some partnerships this year where the technician has one stop, no matter what their company has invested in, to engage with information on a job site, whether it's parts, whether it's learning, whether it's IoT diagnostic information. They have one spot. So that's been a big push for us, is to say, make your system malleable, integratable, and then make sure the data coming out of XOi and those other platforms you may be using is circling up to a 1 + 1 = 3, to your point. It should be additive. It shouldn't just be, here's XOi's data and then vendor A, B, and C next to each other on a dashboard. How are we connecting those dots to make it some insight that we can actually re-engage people with? to your point. So that's really important. I think as far as the AI piece, we're releasing AI generated work summaries. We're actually taking workflow data and creating really strong textual summaries of work. And so not all video content's great for customers. It can be really effective for credits, concessions, for documenting, how something was fixed. But how do we get that in a format that is really well written? Technicians are not known to be super verbose or really be guys that want to be sitting there typing out a bunch of things. We've got the ability for just a simple couple of videos and maybe some yes, no step types in our conditional workflow to create a 4 or 5 paragraph detail on what was done on that job. And through beta, the end customer is like, this is phenomenal. I think in commercial, it's really effective because they're going to billing to somewhere else for that, what they call one leg trips where a spouse is at home and the other one's at work. They can communicate more effectively with them. So there's an example of if you're giving the technician value and ease, hey, with XOi, I just take a picture of a data plate. I don't have to type it. With XOi, I did a couple of videos and I got a work summary created. So I don't have to type that anymore or hear from the office or the customer. Oh, really? I got a $16,000 bill here, $16,000 bill here. And you wrote, I came and fixed it. Like, I got to have more detail than that, And so that's what we think about when it comes to that engagement is, am I making their lives easier, simpler? Am I giving them that information? And then I will tell you, a company that with 12,000 videos, here's the beautiful thing about that. There is a wealth of knowledge and information there. And whether or not they're using it today or not, the ability to learn from that and apply it in this new world we're seeing around AI is still absolutely there. These are things that can be referenced for a myriad of different reasons. But when you look at, I think we've collected something like 15 million pieces of content this year so far, right? So being able to learn from those 15 million pieces of content, symptom, issue, resolution, understanding how things are performing and why from an asset perspective, we're constantly looking for ways to plug that back into the ecosystem for everybody to say, hey, you're in front of a blank OEM model number blank. Well, you're in Birmingham, Alabama. Here's the 3 issues we see in Birmingham on this model, right? And here's how effective you can be.
Yeah.
And so that becomes really powerful as well.
So now not only are we making it more fun, the technicians get to focus on the things that really empower them because they're focusing on their unique ability. We're making their lives easier. We're making it easier to communicate with the customer. They're not having to do a lot of data entry, which if you've got technicians, that typing stuff into your system is not their strong suit. You're making not only it more enjoyable for them because they get to focus on their unique talent, but you're also making it easier for them so that they can do more of that. And, when you said that company that has the 12,000 videos, I think about when you collect data, one of the hardest things is to collect enough data so that it's meaningful. And they planted the tree 20 years ago. Right. But they've just been letting the fruit rot. They haven't been harvesting it. Well, now they just got to go harvest and it could transform their business. Whereas if you're in a position where you didn't plant that tree, you don't have a system like XOi that can grab that data for you and you're not at least collecting it. I think that's like the first step is just start collecting the data, whether you know what you're going to do with it or not. Start collecting the data.
Collect the data and make sure that it's against a business case that actually improves your business today, because that's how you keep the data coming in. Otherwise, if there's no value to it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's interesting seeing how many AI companies, for example, have cropped up and they're doing these webinars and they're like, look at our amazing smart solution. We leverage this tool and that tool and we can do all these things. It's like, okay, what do I need to get started? Well, you need a really good data source and you gotta have a really good way to re-engage your users once we give you the smarts. That's what we do at XOi, right? And so the ability to go, it's interesting to go, yeah, just make sure you get all this data and then make sure you have a way to get it back out to the field once we do our smart stuff with it. Well, I would rather own the data extraction and re-engagement piece. And certainly we're doing the smart side as well.
Yeah.
Than trying to say, hey, I can do as much as on Google. The reality is, most of the information that you need in any given job is not going to be a Google search away.
No, it was funny. You just reminded me, we had a client that they implemented this new software. It's AI, it was this AI chatbot thing. And they're like, well, how does a chatbot learn? They're like, here's the 700 questions you need to give it detailed responses for. And they looked at it, they're like, what? Are you kidding? This is not AI. This is not how AI is supposed to work. So many cool things. Tell me, to do this real quick. I don't usually ask to do this, but we've talked a lot about XOi. Tell us, what is XOi? We never did talk about that.
Yeah.
What is XOi?
Yeah.
And how do people learn more about your software platform and this data collection and extraction engagement solution that you have? How do they contact you?
Yeah, so XOi.io is our website, easiest way to get there. And we get a lot of information and customers that will look like you and perform like you and give you a sense of what we do in terms of ROI for our customers. If you think about XOi in a nutshell, forget about the FSM space. We integrate with all those players, field service management systems that exist out there. We are focused solely on the job site and everything that happens on the job site. So when you think about that, how do I educate? How do I have operational guidance for technicians so it's consistent? And then based on them engaging with that information and collecting content, how does that impact my office, the technician themselves, the end customer? And we do that through photo, video, notes, and a variety of other smart tools that allow us to do really interesting things for customers across all the boring stuff too, right? Sometimes the boring stuff of just a good PM and a good sales quote, and also the really cool stuff through our journeyman products, where a picture of a data plate gives you a wealth of information in seconds about that unit.
Yeah.
So everything in between, but think about every stakeholder on the job site. Our software is going to allow you to engage with them effectively and really provide a great customer experience in the process.
The photos, the videos, the notes has always stood out to me as something that's unique to what XOi. But the photo of the data plate, and it's like, here's the history of this unit.
Yeah.
And like all the stuff you've done, like there is some incredible value there. I love that.
Or here's the last guy at your company that saw this unit. People spend an insane amount of time on that. And again, it's like you wouldn't put it in a really cool marketing video, but it's like, you know how much time a tech goes, who's here last? Bob? Let me call Bob. Let me have a conversation with Bob. Bob, what'd you do on this unit? Seamless, right? Every single time.
Love it. Aaron, thank you so much. This has been great. I love our conversations because you always find a way to blend both the people side and the technology side into business, which most companies are good at one or the other. And I love how you're able to combine them and say, hey, this is how technology can make your people better. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.